I love you because you are here is very different than I love you because you bring me this, and this.
Yes.
Creates a very different sense of safety.
And being judged, because it's like, that's why I'm very worried about the family you choose. There's all this talk now about, oh, there's the family you choose, but I'm like, but a lot of people aren't going to get chosen for that family. There's a lot of people who are going to be on the sidelines. They're not that easy to get along with, or they don't have, you know what I mean? I'm like, but what about those people? What are the ways that we can find places for everyone to belong?
Gretchen, thank you so much for being here on the Plucking Up podcast. We are so excited to have you today.
I'm so happy to be talking to you. Thanks for having me.
So will you tell us a little bit from your perspective, with all of the research and the work that you've done around just happiness and fulfillment and health in general, what are some of the things that you have learned about the importance of relationships and connectivity as it relates to us being generally happy, whole, healthy human beings?
Well, it's a very crucial element. I mean, if you had to say, what is the secret to happiness? I mean, there's a lot of ways you could answer that, but certainly one of the ways that you could answer it is to say it all comes from relationships. Ancient philosophers and contemporary scientists agree that to be happier, we need to have strong, enduring bonds. We need to feel like we belong. We need to be able to confide. We need to be able to get support. And just as important for happiness, we need to be able to give support. And so whenever we're trying to figure out how to spend our precious time, energy, or money, something that broadens relationships or deepens relationships is probably something that's going to make us happier. It's just very important to have. I mean, when they look at people who say they're happy at work, there are people who say, I have a friend at work, not just somebody to make pleasant conversation with, but somebody who has my back, somebody I could tell an important secret. And do I feel like the person that I directly report to cares about me and wants to see me succeed in my aims for myself? When you ask people, are they happier? People who have more friends are happier. Like, this just really, really matters to our happiness.
Okay, so I'm over here. If you're only listening and you're not watching, you can't see my I'm nodding,
Yeah.
I'm with you. Here's my question that I'm really interested to hear your perspective on. You just spoke with so much conviction and authority. For the record, I completely believe and agree with every word that you just said. And yet, why are friendships and relationships something that when it comes to spending our time, our money, and our energy, it feels like there is this huge delta between we say it's important and
Yeah.
we agree that it's valuable, but then when it actually comes to spending time, money, or energy, there's 30 other things that I can think of that people would go well, yeah, I would pay for that. Yes, I would dedicate one night a week or, a weekend, a quarter, whatever. And yet it just feels like there's some sort of disconnect where it's friendships and relationships feel like it's yes, it's important. Is it that we think that they should just happen organically? Is it that there's a misunderstanding about how they work or their importance? Do you experience that gap of kind of being oh, that's fluffy and extra, but it's actually the most important thing?
Well, it is funny because some people, I remember reading a comment where somebody's like, I really don't do the friends thing. And I'm like, well, I kind of don't think you can just opt out of friends for a happier life. But I think you're raising a lot of important points, which is relationships, they take time. They take energy, and they often take money, because it often means I'm going to buy you a birthday present if I come to your birthday party. I'm going to fly out to see your new baby. I'm going to fly and get a hotel room for my college reunion. These are all decisions that would broaden and deepen relationships, but in order to do them, we have to spend money. So it does cost us time, energy, or money. So I think part of it is just acknowledging this is something that has to show up. It has to show up in our schedule. It has to show up in our spending. It has to show up in how we live our lives. For that reason, I am a big fan of joining or starting groups, because when you're managing a lot of one-off friendships, it's very, very hard to manage, because it's let's go out for coffee, then you need to reschedule, then I need to reschedule, and it just doesn't even feel worth it. Something like a group, there's a lot more. It's we're going to get together the first Tuesday of every month. And then it's if I miss a month, well, I know when it is going to be the next month. If I miss for 3 months, that's okay. Everybody, the same group is still there. Often when groups come together, it's I'll invite a couple of my friends, you invite a couple of your friends. Now I have friends that were friends of yours, you make friends with friends of mine. That is one of the best ways to make friends. This is one of my secrets of adulthood. One of the easiest ways to make friends is to make friends with your friends of your friends. There is no more elegant way to say that, but it is true. It is called triadic closure.
Oh, well, that was elegant. So we'll go with that.
But what's nice about that is then you have what's called relationship density, meaning it's not just a lot of individual people. It's like it's an interconnected social group. And that is much more likely to give you a feeling of belonging. And it's a much more stable thing because there's a lot of points of connection within the group. And so I am a member of many, many groups. I have started many groups because they are such an engine of happiness for me, because it is hard to manage. And I think especially if you're in the kind of rush hour of life, when you have like, maybe you have like a job, you have little kids, you have aging parents, like you have a lot going on. Sometimes friendship, there just isn't time for it. Or maybe you're friends with the people whose schedules match up with your schedule, but you don't have time for someone like your college friends or your hometown friends, even though they're really important to you. So I think one of the reasons I am a big fan of social media and other kinds of technology is I do think that it makes it easier for us to have these little very low lift touch points where I'm thinking of you. Like my 2 college roommates, I don't see them very often, but like whenever I see a picture like from years ago of us together, I just send it to them like flashback, and then and then they'll write a little something back, and it just keeps us connected as like a threesome, the way we've been for so long. And then at some point I was like, okay, we really have to plan a trip to get together. Like, how about this fall? But we've been keeping it alive over time with these very, very little moments of connection.
Okay, I love this. And honestly, we could spend the rest of our conversation talking about groups.
Yes.
About starting and joining groups, because I could not agree more that I do feel like that is kind of a secret sauce. Specifically, I love the phrase "the rush hour of life." I have one friend who is a lifer for me, lifelong friend. Like she will be at my bedside when I die. But we are in this season of friendship where we are really disconnected, and I just can't seem to kind of figure out like the rhythm. Like, why can't I maintain this friendship in the way that I can other relationships? And what emerged to me is I was like, oh, because she's not in any of my groups. And there is like something that and so what it requires of me feels enormous, because it's like one-on-one is the only way that we hang out. And it's the only way that we connect. And when I think even just like, and I hate to make people or relational health, introduce things like efficiency, but it's something we have to, like, we're humans in the world that only have a certain amount of time. And it's like, I can sit in a room, which I do. I've been meeting with the same group of women for 11 years, every single Wednesday night at 8:30 p.m. It's just like, it is baked into my life. It is a core commitment. I do not say yes to other things on Wednesday night because this is the most important thing I could be doing with my time. And in 2 hours, typically there's about 6 people that are in this group, give or take. It's not give or take. It's actually a very solid group of 7, but between 5 and 6 every week, with sick kids and, traveling. But I can share, and to know that I'm spending, let's say, 25 minutes, and I'm like, I'm in a fight with Ben, and, here's like, and I'm telling all the details, and I'm wanting feedback or whatever it is. It takes me 25 minutes to share that. And now I have built intimacy and connection with 6 people in the room who have heard that. And then, so it's like all of a sudden that 25 minutes is literally multiplied by 6 because I'm in a group context. And then what starts to happen is those 6 people are creating space. They're asking follow-up questions. They're giving their perspective. And in them responding to me, there are all of these like intimacy webs that are getting created. That it's like, oh, by Shandi sharing about her experience with Madison to Liz, but Miriam, I'm actually listening to that. I'm now learning something about and it's just like this multiplier. That in 2 hours, what happens relationally, the density, the intimacy, and the connection is so significant. And yet it took the same amount of time as it would to go on a 2-hour walk with a friend, which admittedly that's a long walk, but
exactly. I agree 100%. But I will also say that for some people, and it may be that both are true for the same person. And maybe this is something to think about if you're a person who's listening and thinking like, well, I don't have 6 friends to start a group with where we could do that. Another way to make friends is to work on a project together. It's often easier to make friends with people when you're working on something together than when you're just socializing. So if you feel a little bit like you don't sort of know how to do it, to kind of connect with somebody socially, join volunteer, get us like work on something with people, because often too, we often like people better when we've been around them more. And so there might often, like, if you've been working with somebody, like maybe they didn't seem like something that you would particularly connect with, but over time, because you've got this like shared purpose and you're like working together, you will often find that you like more people than maybe you initially thought. And so that can also be a way to like make more friends. And I will say this also, because I'm sure you hear this all the time, making friends as an adult is one of the big happiness challenges of people now that they talk about. So I would offer people these words of encouragement. One is, research shows that we tend to like people who like us. It's like if someone seems to like us, we're like, wow, that person has good taste. I guess I like them too. And so we often think that it's going to be very awkward if we make a gesture of friendship, or if you're sort of like, you feel kind of silly being like, hey, do you want to grab coffee after. But people really, the other thing that research shows is that people really do understand the value of relationships. They really do want to have friendships. And so if you reach out with an overture, it's probably going to be that somebody welcomes it because they see the value, and they also are inclined to like you because you're showing that you like them. And so it can, when you're the one reaching out, you can feel just like, I said the wrong thing, I don't know what to do. But just in your mind, think, no, actually, probably the person on the other side is welcoming this and sees this as an opportunity. So I think that can be reassuring if you're feeling like a little bit shy or a little bit reserved.
And the research shows that we consistently underrate how we think people perceive us.
Yes.
There's like this likability chasm where it's like, I walk away from a conversation with you analyzing everything stupid, like I said or did,
and
or
that's
wasn't
called
interesting.
The spotlight effect,
yes.
Which is people thinking that everybody notices every kind of thing that they do wrong, or that they have the socks are the wrong, their socks don't match or something. Yeah, we just don't notice it. We are among the most social creatures on the planet. For us, social relationships, their opportunity, their danger, like we are just highly attuned to the social all the time.
It's very different in other places of the world that I've experienced, where habits and rituals and routines where the primary goal is relationships and friendships seem to be a little bit more kind of socially acceptable. But I find it easy. I truly can say it is easier for me to commit this huge commitment, at least 2 hours a week, once a week, is easier for me to manage than like one-off walks or park dates, or it is easier for me to do that because it's a habit, and because I've put this kind of important rock down, and I'm like, the stream of my life will go around this rock because the rock isn't moving. The work that it takes to do that is actually significantly less than for me doing something randomly once a month or once every 6 weeks, which seems to require an enormous amount of coordination and scheduling and texting back and forth into perpetuity until we all want to die.
And you've pointed out something that's very important that I want to underscore, which is sometimes when you're trying to, let's say you're trying to start a group or something, it's not uncommon for people in your life to be kind of irked, because maybe it's slightly less convenient for them that you're not around on Wednesday night. Or like, maybe they're like, well, now I have to go to the gym in the morning because I can't go after work, or maybe this, or maybe that, or maybe that, but whatever. But here's the thing is, if you are consistent, then the stream of their life will also change, and they can adapt. And so I think sometimes people, out of kind of a consideration for others, are like, well, I can't do that because everybody in my life is sort of grumbling about it. But I'm like, if you stick to it and do it regularly, then they will adjust. But you have to hold that thing in place, because if you're not consistent, then they don't become consistent. We all have to kind of form our habits around each other. Like, I just have a new puppy, and so now I'm like, I know that my puppy wakes up at 5:30. I also wake up at 5:30, but I'm usually, when I wake up at 5:30, I do very different things with my time than I do with my puppy. But it's like, now I know that's when she wakes up. But then I know she'll go back to sleep at 7:30. It's like, now, because she's regular, I can start planning what I need to do around her. And so I think it's really, I think you're talking about how the consistency is helpful for you, but it also helps the other people in your life to accommodate what you want to do.
That is so good. That is so good. It's almost like, because I have heard that a lot from folks, that it's like, well, in the name of being accommodating or inclusive or like easy, will like constantly be flexing.
Yes. And
And it's like
it's,
what that actually does is for everybody. I feel like that
yes,
introduces a level of challenge and
yes,
chaos and instability.
100%.
Whereas
Yes.
putting your flag in the sand, oftentimes I feel like can seem very inflexible. Like, this is what we're doing. This is when it's going to happen. You could be a part of it or you could not. Feels inflexible and almost like not accommodating. But I do believe that in the long run, that actually serves people and to your point, not just the person who planted the flag, but like everybody who gathers around the flag is accommodated by that like level of consistency.
I'm a big fan of plant the flag and then say, but if this doesn't work, let's talk. Like even with a restaurant,
Mm,
I love to go to Orsay at 75th and Lexington, but I'm happy to go elsewhere.
that's good.
Most people are just like, yeah, I'll go there. Because it's like, just, it doesn't matter as long as it's reasonably convenient. Like, just pick. Or, but sometimes you do get in these cycles where people, out of all good intentions, are trying to be
Yeah.
so accommodating that they end up in analysis paralysis. And I've heard some really interesting ways to deal with this. For instance, I was talking to some people who had trouble with Disneyland because it's like, where do you want to go? I don't know. Where do you want to go? Like, what do you want to start with? Well, and so they sort of were accommodating themselves into the ground. And so what they did is they each individually wrote down what are the top 3 things they wanted to do. And then they looked at all of the choice, sort of like on your own, just you
Yeah.
yourself. If it were up to you, what were your top 3? Then they looked at them. And so then it was very easy because it's like, well, if one thing is in many people's top 3, well, then that's at the top of the group. And then you would work your way down, but you would make sure that every single person had at least one of their top 3 in it so that nobody went and was like, well, I didn't get to do any of the things that I most wanted to do. And so that's a way to externalize it so that it's
Mm-hmm.
not just like, because if you have somebody like you or like maybe like me that's like, well, if nobody's going to speak up, I'll tell you what I want to do. Like I have no trouble with that, but it can sometimes for some people feel like, well, you sort of like, you just, we're doing it all your way. And it's like, well, somebody's got to make a plan.
Mm-hmm.
So how do you create these workarounds to bring everybody's voice in?
I love that. That's so good. Okay, so what are some other things that you have learned specifically when you're forming a group? So things that you've said is like there's a level of you're taking responsibility for it and knowing that you're kind of signing up for that, but that it's a worthwhile
Worth it.
investment. We've talked about kind of consistency and flag planting. What are some other things that in your decades of starting groups, when you think about the most fruitful, interesting, mutually beneficial, life-giving groups that you've been a part of, what are some other elements that you've seen consistently?
Well, I think it's really helpful if you choose something that is really valuable to you and that you're really honestly interested in. And I think sometimes, like, it's very typical that you have a book club. Well, I happen to love reading, so I'm in a book club, but I also kind of quirky for me is that I love children's literature and young adult literature. I have a very strong taste for this. And when I started, I thought like I was the only adult in New York City who liked reading children's literature and young adult literature. But then when I started asking around, I realized that this is a taste that people have. Like they have a taste for
Mm,
science fiction or thrillers. And now I'm in 2 groups where we really focus on that. And it's interesting because it's not the same people that I would have in my regular book club
mm-hmm.
because it's people who share this taste. But so that has kind of expanded. It's given me ties to people who I wouldn't otherwise probably be in a group with, but we share a very deep interest. And so we really can very deeply connect. Also, like one thing to know about you yourself is like, do you like to talk shop or not? I
Mm,
love to talk shop, but I work on my own a lot. I'm a writer and I'm a podcaster and I've got a newsletter and I've got products and I've got an app. I've got all these things. And so part of what I try to do is put myself into places where I will talk shop because I love to talk shop. Some people don't like to talk shop. So that wouldn't be a good source of like forming a group necessarily, but because I love it, I'm in many groups that are writers groups where we don't talk about our actual writing, but we talk about like being a writer as like as an occupation, because it's like anything, it's an occupation, but because we all work on our own, kind of reinventing the wheel a lot of times. And so you want to think about what's something that you're genuinely interested in. I remember my agent was saying, this was years and years ago, but she was saying, I would like to start a group for people who read People magazine because I would always be prepared and I have a lot to say. And I thought that is really fun. You could have my sister's always she lives in Los Angeles. She's always being invited to finale parties. I think watch parties are a great thing. If there's a show that you really love, like have a watch party. Like you sit around, you watch, you talk about it. it can be fun. My father-in-law is in a group where they talk about fly fishing. They don't even go fly fishing together. They just talk about fly fishing. I was in a friend where she lived by herself, but she loved to bake like fancy desserts, but she had no outlet for it. So she started a group where it was all people who love to do like very fine baking and dessert making. And so they met as a group, and each time two people would bring dessert. So they would all come, they would all eat these beautiful desserts and talk about cooking desserts and whatever else. And so she had a chance to like do that and talk about that and show off all her like amazing dessert making skills with people who really appreciated it. So again, it's like there's all these things that we can do. But here is something to caution people about when it comes to relationships. I've been thinking about this a lot because my next book is going to be about the empty nest.
Oh, okay.
I'm in that stage. I've got 2 daughters who have just left, and I'm very interested in the empty nest stage as a forced reckoning in adulthood. And I'm rebranding it as Open Door because nobody likes the phrase empty nest, but that we're sort of stuck with it.
Yeah, it's intrinsically kind of sad. Yeah.
Yeah. But here's what I've noticed. And this is very, very poignant, and it's something to really be aware of as you go through life. Many people, their children leave, and they are astonished and dismayed to realize that they don't have friends. But the thing is, they thought they had friends. They thought they had friends because their lives looked like they had friends, because they're like, oh, my group text is always blowing up. Like I'm like in contact with 1 million people every day, and I see these people, and we're having dinner together, and we're cheering on the sidelines together, and we travel together. And we've been together for years, and we have so much fun together, and I'm so happy to see this person. But they're not friends. They're friendly acquaintances, meaning that the relationship is all about this external connection, the soccer team, the cello, the theater, whatever, the school, whatever it is. If you are friends with somebody, you have to move them out of the friendly acquaintance into a friendship. And you have to think to yourself, have I done the things that real friends do? Have I ever given them a gift or received a gift? Have I gone out on like a double date with them? Have I invited them into my home? Have I been invited into their home? Have I followed up with them when something important happened? Like, I know your mom's surgery happened this morning. Is everything okay? Like, have you done a favor? Have you asked for a favor? These are things that, have you confided an important secret? Do you feel like you could confide an important secret? This is what friends do. But for a lot of people, they think, oh, I have this very lively social group because it looks like having friends,
Right.
but it's really all focused around, this external thing. And then when you're not going to football games anymore, it all goes away because there's nothing else tying you together.
It's so interesting because I feel like you're talking about what I do feel like I've heard a ton of people in this season of life talk about in a marriage context. That you have kids.
Ooh, interesting.
And you're like, now we're focused on the kids, and we've got, we have this shared mission that we're on.
Yeah.
And then our kids leave, and we look at each other, and we're like, we're strangers. Like we are not partners. We are not best friends. We were co-parents. And now that we've done our job, we kind of feel this sense of like, we don't know each other. And that feels like a very common narrative. And I love that you're taking that very common human experience, but then instead of it being the two people looking at each other going, we were strangers, the adults looking out and going like, wait, did I have friends? Or was this like actually all kind of like an infrastructure byproduct of being an active and engaged parent?
That's exactly what it is. It is a byproduct of being an active, engaged parent. It's a wonderful byproduct.
Sure.
And by the way, if you want to make friends, those are great people to become friends with because you have so much in common. You're going to see them all the time. You probably have friends in common. If you want to start that group of 6 people who are going to meet every week, here are some great people to start. But you just have to move them along the chain of intimacy and not stay out there in that friendly way. Same thing at work, right? You can talk to somebody, work beside somebody, have great conversations by the coffee machine for years. But then it's like a friend of mine said that her test was, if I had a birthday party for myself, or a milestone birthday party, would I invite them? And she said, I have 1 million friends at work. She's super social. She goes to conferences, like constantly, like having lunches, having dinners, But she's like, but the person that I would invite to a birthday party, well, that's a small group of people.
Yeah.
So you want to be thinking like in loose ties. I mean, there's all this research kind of like in the career context that loose ties are very valuable. Like if you're trying to get a new job or get information, often the people that you don't know very well, like your cousin's best friend or something like that, often are really useful because they have information that you do not have. The people closest to you tend to have pretty much the same information that you do. So loose ties are kind of disproportionately valuable given that they're very loose ties. But but it's from loose ties that we build strong ties. And so, but that doesn't happen automatically, just with
Yeah.
sort of time. That's why when they say like, oh, it takes X number of hours to make a friend, I'm like, no, because if you go through some terrible
Yeah.
experience together, you can make a best friend overnight, and you can spend thousands of hours with somebody laughing and having fun and walk away and never see them again and never think of them again. I mean,
Yep.
it's not that straightforward.
I love it. Almost kind of feels like, so to go back, and you were talking about the groups, and you named so many like wonderfully kind of specific, things that people could come around, whether that is like baking fine desserts or just talking about fly fishing, not
Yes.
actually doing it together.
Yeah.
So I love that and that to me almost feels like, okay, so the group has to have a purpose. I mean, one thing that we didn't actually say out loud that I think is worth probably saying out loud, that kind of covers all of this, is intentionality. Right?
Mhm.
Where it's like there's something really intentional about setting out and going like, I want to read young adult literature. I'm intentionally knowing myself, and I'm in tune with my own desires and what lights me up. Now I'm going out and I'm going to create something with intentionality that is going to create a space for other people that share that same interest. So there's
Mhm.
intentionality. There's also like a stated purpose. You're not going out and just being like, who wants to hang out every so often?
Yes.
You're like, who wants to hang out this often for
Yes.
this purpose? And there's this like external thing that gets people in the room, whether it's the fancy
Yes.
desserts or the young adult literature or the fly fishing. It attracts the people. So there's like a real specificity to the external thing that's bringing you together.
Yes.
But then what you're saying is like, once you're in that room, if you truly want them to become friends and not just your young adult lit, acquaintances, then there has to be this move beyond the external thing that brought you together into
Exactly.
actual authentic intimacy, connected like relationships.
Yeah, yeah. And it takes a lot of time, energy, and also money often. And but it's totally worth it because it just is so meaningful in our lives. There's so many funny things that people have done. I'm trying to think of some of my other favorites for groups. I know a bunch of guys where they said that they were like, we're not going to read books. We know that nobody would finish the book. So they took turns picking famous profiles from the New Yorker, because if you go back over the decades, there've been these extraordinary writers profiling extraordinary people. Like there's this incredibly famous profile of Johnny Carson or whatever. And so they're beautifully written. They're about like fascinating characters, and they're like 4,000 words, and that you can get them online. And so this was a group that's like, let's make it manageable. And then I have a group where they were reading all of Proust. So they just were like, okay, we're the kind of people that want to read Proust. So we're just embarking on that journey. And it lasted for years and years.
I love that. This was not the topic of the conversation, but it kind of does go to your thought on investing time, money, and energy. I do find that people get real thrown off about the money piece, that it's kind of like, well, I mean, I remember I joined a sorority my freshman year of college. I did not last very long. I was in there for about 6 months. That's not the point, though. The point being, I remember people leveling criticism against people in the Greek system. And one of the kind of like disparaging things that people would say is that you're basically paying for friends, like you're buying friendship. And I think that we kind of do, I think we carry that a little bit in our culture, that it's like friendship is something that's organic. It should happen naturally. You shouldn't have to force it. You definitely shouldn't have to pay for it, or it's like not real. But then I'm like, what other good things do we apply that same logic to in our life? Very few things that I can think of that I'm like, no, this is a meaningful, super important part of life, but I somehow don't think that I should have to pay for it or put like, time or energy towards it. And I just had a guest on the show earlier this morning who he was talking about, he experienced in a season of intense loneliness, and he went and he got an MBA. Like he went to business school and he was very uninterested in getting into his MBA. It was literally just like, I need friends. Like, I need other people whose brains work like I do, who have like similar aspirations. To which I gave him a huge amount of credit for being like self-aware enough that he knew that he was like lonely, but also, wow, you went out and spent like a K on an education that you didn't want to get the byproduct of that thing, which is just friends. But I know a
Right.
lot of people who, if you were like, would you invest a few $1,000s into like community or connection or friendship, would be like, no, that's weird. It like has to be like a backdoor thing.
Mhm.
But why? If we're saying that relationships are one of the most important parts of life, why can't that be the main thing?
But maybe it maybe he's an extreme example. That is very, very interesting. I totally get it, by the way. But maybe you can reframe it and say something like, well, hospitality costs money. If I invite people into my home, of course I want to have
Right.
like wonderful food and drink, and I want to have like nice napkins and this, or maybe I need to buy a dining room table. I remember my sister, who's incredibly social. It was a huge moment for her when she had enough money to buy a dining room table, because she just
Mm,
used a bunch of like cardboard boxes with tablecloths on them and for years. So, the dining room table for her represented hospitality. But it was thousands of dollars that she was spending. And so that's part of it, is thinking like, well, I'm traveling to see you. So am I buying a ticket or am I buying an experience? Am I investing in travel, or am I,
yeah.
am I spending my money on a plane ticket, or am I investing in a relationship? So I think part of it is reframing that most things we have to give gifts. Like, that's part of what it is to be a friend, which is, I'm going to your wedding, I'm going to give you a gift,
Yeah.
and but I think, there's ways to do it so that you can keep those costs low. And so if you want to be mindful, especially if there's different abilities to pay in a group. But again, it's back to with the point you're making about intentionality. Like, if you say like, I want to do this, this is what the group can do, let's set it up in a way so that everybody can do it, then that's much easier. Now, here's an example of a group where it might cost money, but maybe you would think, kind of like the MBA, it's worth it. My daughter who lives like here in New York City. A friend of hers started a group where they learn things. So you take turns learning things. So like time you might go and it's a tequila tasting. And so you're tasting all this tequila. And another time you're going to go and they're going to teach you how to shoot pool. And kind of the fun of it is like, oh, we're going to like learn all these things. Now
Yeah.
you have to pay for it. Because a lot of times it's like, okay, well, if you want to go to the tequila tasting, it's gonna be $35 or
Sure.
whatever.
Yeah.
But then it's fun and you're doing this
Mm-hmm.
thing and it's kind of expanding your horizons and you're going all over New York City. I think it's an amazing idea for a group. Now, talk about hard to manage. That's a lot of coordination and a lot of planning. Like, to
Yeah.
me, that sounds like a very burdensome kind of group, but like, she's young and like, doesn't have a lot of outside responsibilities. So maybe she can do it. Whereas your group, I'm like, that's the way to do it. No decision fatigue whatsoever. But but then again, it's like, would you say it was like a sorority? You're buying to have friends because you're buying your $35 ticket to hang out with this group of people and to drink tequila. And you'd say,
Yeah.
well, but this is an experience that we're all sharing. Like, I'm learning something. This is really fun. This is a way to connect with people that I don't know. Now we have something to talk about. I don't have to make polite conversation the whole time, like at a cocktail party, because we have something to talk about, which is like, oh my gosh, like, I can't tell the difference between these three things.
Yeah.
Can you? Like, what's happening? Whatever. Um, it might be money well spent.
Yeah, and those shared experiences, making new memories, even in our like very highly committed group
Hmm.
where we meet every Wednesday night, once a month we go out on a Saturday night, because it's pretty intense. I mean, I think what we're doing is we're just actually skipping a lot of the external stuff to go to like and this is, frankly, it was my intention from the beginning was, I'm new to this city. I don't have any friends and I don't have any family. My vision is I want a group of best friends who I can call at 3 a.m. Like, I want people that I am doing life with. Like, so the external stuff actually didn't matter as much. Like, we don't like to all read the same things. Like, we actually spend our time really differently. What aligned us was friendship. Like, we want intimate, committed, consistent friends. So I feel like we just went straight for it versus like using the excuse of kind of an external thing to get people in the room, and then kind of like gradually graduating from the acquaintance into like, true friendship via the very intentional, questions or kind of prompts that you shared with us earlier.
So when you were starting out, what was the nature of it when you were starting out and people didn't know each other very well? Well, you started with
That
just
was
one other
it.
person.
I
So,
started with one other person,
uh-huh.
and that was it. It was like, what if we got together every Wednesday night and we were just really intentional with our conversation? Like,
And where do you meet?
we met through friends of friends, and
No,
they had
where
just
where
moved.
do you, where do you meet?
Oh,
Like you meet it.
we used to meet at a pub. So we used to meet at a local pub, and now we've moved to houses because, well, it escalated very quickly and we don't have to go there, but we now all share property together. And we live in like a close proximate friend group. So we bought a single family lot. We split it into, we managed to fit three homes on it, and then kind of started building and accumulating from there, really anticipating that we were all going to have kids at some point. And one of the trends that I saw is like loneliness and disconnection and social isolation seem to skyrocket when people start having families, because there is this sense of like, well, now I have babies to care for and we need a babysitter and we need to plan 6 weeks in advance. And so our theory was, if we design our life anticipating, and we all wanted kids. And by the way, like, I love being a parent. I'm not like, taking care of kids is such a bummer, but can we design our life externally so that our social ties and connections, even once we enter into this new life stage, we've just designed it so that we don't have all of those barriers.
Can I just say, I want to read a novel where this is the premise, and then one husband has an affair with one wife, and it just the match is lit. I think that is amazing. So, and I kind of predict that that will happen. So you'll have to tell.
No, do
Yeah.
not say that. I
No.
do not receive that. I do
Okay,
not receive
okay.
that.
I take it back. I take it back. I take it back. Purely fictional. Purely, but wouldn't it be a great novel?
It would be a horrifying. I cannot imagine. It
Oh.
would be but you're not the only one. But okay, so let's dive into this.
Mm-hmm.
It is interesting to me because, listen, when I share this with people, which I wasn't intending to, but when I do, that is where people's brains go.
Mm-hmm.
Is like there is this kind of like red flag danger thing that I think
Mm-hmm.
when you think about living in such close proximity, mixed gender, and that to me, I'm like curious, like, why do you think your brain went to people live? Because here's my lived experience is actually, the closer you get to people, the more human they become. I think most affairs start because you have a fantasy about escaping your own life and entering into somebody else's life that is better than yours.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that fantasy is actually fueled by distance.
Mm-hmm.
So it's like, oh,
Yeah.
I see you from afar, like, wow, like, must be nice. My
Right.
husband's a total hothead, right?
Yeah.
I live next door to a guy. I'm not sure if you're interested in the Enneagram, but he's an Enneagram 9. Okay.
Oh, yes.
So both
Yeah.
husbands to both sides of me are Enneagrams 9s, and I'm married to a 3. For those of you who are not
I'm a
Enneagrammers,
3.
the 9 is the peacekeeper and the 3 is the achiever. Okay. And I'm an Enneagram 8. So my husband and I, we are hot heads. We are big personalities. We are strong. We fight. It would be very easy, I feel like, for me to fantasize about being married to a guy who doesn't lose his cool and doesn't have a temper. Like, must be nice not to get yelled at when your husband's stressed out, or for him to think he's right about, whatever. Must be nice. There is so much proximity and so much closeness. Like, I am so connected to them as a family, them as a married couple, and then definitely to the wives, because they're my best friends.
Yeah.
That it's like, I am very aware of the
Mhm.
challenges of being married to a man
Interesting.
who doesn't have a temper. And I'm like, I oftentimes leave being like, oh man, I hate being married to a guy with a temper. But what I would hate more is being married to a guy who can't make decisions for 6 months,
Right.
So it's actually like the proximity actually breeds like humanity, and distance is what actually breeds fantasy.
Right. And mystery and right, exactly.
And mystery.
That's
and
very
must
true.
be nice.
Okay, well, let me ask you this question too.
Okay.
This group came about because the wives were friends. Do all the husbands get along very well, or are they kind of like, because they are 1 degree apart?
So it actually was mutual between the men and the women. So it actually started, if I really were to rewind back, it was a couple. So a married couple, Miriam and Chris, my husband, Ben, and I, we started hanging out as a couple. And then pretty early on, I feel like maybe once we invited one other couple into the mix, the wives kind of started meeting, and then the husband started meeting.
Oh, wow.
It only grew.
Interesting.
With mutuality,
because that's
both
the
tricky.
women
and the men. I say that, Gretchen, and this is kind of where, if we go all the way back to the beginning of our conversation and talk about exposure bias, I think something in American culture that is breeding loneliness and disconnection. I'm going to circle back, but if you all will go with me, is this sense that I have to curate this group where I like everybody in the group and I would handpick them to be my friend. I actually don't know if that's a recipe for
Mm,
creating secure connections in a sense of belonging, because
yes.
I think then the premise is as soon as I stop being liked and being chosen, I no longer belong. I'm kicked out.
I think that is so astute and so powerful. And along those lines, I was reading something that when I first read it, it seemed very counterintuitive. And then it made perfect sense to me. And it's very much along the lines of what you're saying. It was saying, if you really want to experience the diversity of human nature, live in a very small town. Because if you're in a big
Yeah,
city, you can pick the people who think exactly like you, who
can
have all the
curate.
same interests and all the same values. And you can all be matching. But if you're in a very small town, you're stuck. It's like these are your neighbors, these are your friends, these are the people you're hanging out with. Like, and so as you're saying, like the idea that everybody would love everybody, it's kind of even as I said it, I think you're exactly right. I was suggesting a false premise, which
Hmm.
is unless everybody likes each other equally, this thing is doomed to fail. I think you're exactly right. We're not even going to expect that everybody's going to like each other equally because not everybody has to like each other equally. We're all here. We're all committed to the structure. It works for us. We all chose it. And if I don't like William that much and William isn't that fond of me, so be it.
And
That's
the
very
group can
interesting.
handle that.
The group
Because
can
as
handle
I was
that.
going through those 7 women, I could actually be like, because I feel like what it sounded like in the when I first answered your question was like, no, it was so curated. It was like very handpicked, and only if both the men and the women all liked each other. But when I actually look at it, my core group of best friends, I could say at least half of them I did not choose.
Mm-hmm.
It was almost like an arranged marriage. So it was
Mm-hmm.
like Alan got married to Kristen. I had met Kristen once. But it was like, but Alan was in. Alan's like our guy. He's been in with us from the beginning. So there was kind of always this sense that it was like, whoever Alan marries is a
Right.
part of our community.
Yes.
And I just think about the way that sets up I'm going to call it a love story for a friendship is very different. Like, I love you because you are here is very different than I love you because you bring me this, and this.
Yes.
And the security that creates of like, I choose you because you're here and you're chosen versus like, I choose you because you qualify
Yes.
creates a very different sense of safety. And I
Well,
think like
and
connection in
judgment
a relation.
and being judged, because it's like that's why I'm very worried about the family you choose. There's all this talk now about, oh, there's the family you choose, but I'm like, but a lot of people aren't going to get chosen for that family. There's a lot of people who are going to be
Mm,
on the sidelines. They're not that easy to get along with, or they don't have, you know what I mean? I'm like, but what about those people? What are the ways that we can find places for everyone to belong?
that is a really good, the family we choose. Ooh, we could unpack that. Yes.
We could unchoose them, because part of the thing that's nice about a family is you're stuck with each other. You have a place at the table simply because you're part of the family.
Yeah.
And there is a security in that. And there is also kind of a magnanimity to that, where it's like, well, so in my book, Secrets of Adulthood, as you said, I have all these secrets of adulthood related to relationships. And one of the ones that people have quoted the most to me since the book came out
Hmm.
is we care for many people we don't particularly care for.
And why do you think that resonates so deeply with people?
Because I think people get it. They're like, yeah, I've got my uncle, and like, I don't agree with a word that comes out of his mouth, but I still care for him deeply. Or like, I have my best friend from home, and our lives have gone in completely different directions, but she's still like one of my earliest relationships. We have these people that we care for, even if we don't particularly care for them. In families, you meet people that you would never otherwise meet.
Totally. And there is a value to, I think, in the same way that you feel worried by the chosen family, I feel worried by the culture that says the moment somebody isn't giving you life or energy or making decisions that align with you, put up your boundaries and like walk away.
Yeah.
I had a pretty big, I'll call it rupture in a friend group about a year ago. And it would be like, I would say it took us probably like 6 months to kind of like fully work through and kind of heal from that specific rupture. And it was kind of precipitated by one specific person in the friend group. And we were talking about it, and she said something to the effect of like, she's like, I just feel like I've been really hard to love lately. I've made things really difficult. And she was saying it in a sense of gratitude of like, thanks for kind of sticking with it. This could actually go back to our whole philosophy on why groups are so important too, because I think in a
Yes.
one-on-one relationship,
It's
when
easy to
somebody
cut
is,
ties.
it is so easy to cut ties. The cost is lower.
Or to let them drift, or they'll just drift apart
Let
too.
them drift apart. The cost of staying also feels a lot higher if it's like, wow, this person is not fun to love right now, or
Right.
I'm not feeling. Whereas when you're in a group, there kind of is this safety where it's like we can handle that. The
Yes.
group can handle 6 months of you being kind of challenging to love, but on the other side of that, because the burden actually then gets spread across all
Yes.
6 people, and
Yeah.
then and we're still being like fed and energized by one another, so the group still feels really healthy. But when we kind of feel like there's a sense of like, if I become, and I, yeah, this is what I said, I was like, I know I have, one, been the difficult one, and
Hmm.
two, I have several seasons ahead of me where I will be the difficult one. And to know that that this group, this friendship, these relationships can hold me, and I'm not constantly trying out for my seat at the
Yes.
table, that
Right.
is what actually creates a sense of belonging. Versus like, I was curated and chosen because I fit this specific thing that you needed in your life, and the moment you are getting that need met somewhere else, or you find somebody who's better at meeting that need, well, what, okay, where's my spot?
Well, it's funny, this reminds me, a friend of mine grew up, she was one of 12 children, so that's unusual, such a big family, and her father was a terrible, terrible alcoholic, raging alcoholic. And I said, "Well, that must have been really hard." And she said, "Actually, it probably wasn't that hard for me compared to like a lot of people." She said, "When you've got such a big family, like no one person makes such an
Wow.
impression." Like, yeah, he was my dad, so like that's bigger than like my older brother. But she said, I was very buffered because there were just so
Mm,
many people around. And I've always remembered that. And I think you're right. There is something where like a group can, it's like if you've been in a workplace where there's one person who's very, very difficult, the team can take it, but like if they have like a partner, well, the partner might be driven bonkers, but the
right.
team can kind of absorb the difficulty
Yeah.
and kind of like make the best of it, and whatever. So yeah, it's very interesting. Yeah. Well, it's funny because in my book Better Than Before, that's all about habit change. It's interesting how many habits that people, because it's all about how can you make and break habits. And it's funny because when you think about habits, you often think about like exercise. But when you really talk to people about the habits they want to form, a lot of times it's, I want the habit of friendship. I want the habit of like making
Mm,
and keeping friends, or things like, I want the habit of reading. You're like, well, if you like to read, just find time to read. But people are like, but it always go like friendship. It's something that always drifts to the bottom of the to-do list unless you like explicitly make a place for it in your life. And that's why like having a book group where you're meeting friends and reading books, it's like, oh, now you have two things. Or like you're like, we solved our real estate problem and are
yeah.
going deep with our friends. Like, it's nice when you're like, a lot of times relationships will make other parts of your life. A lot of people are in running groups or bird watching groups, or like it's not just the friendship or the relationship. There are all these things: the sense of belonging, the sense of security, the sense of support, giving and getting support. So much can come from it.
Wow. Well, Gretchen, I just have to say, waxing poetic about friendships and relationships with someone who thinks about it so much and is so intentional and thoughtful and wise has been such a gift. So thank you so, so much for joining me on the show, and yeah, just sharing your both lived experience and wisdom in this specific and very important part of life. We're super grateful.
Thanks so much.